The shadows danced across Gwendolyn Fairchild's tear-streaked face as she knelt in the blackened remains of what had once been her home. The Montana Territory wilderness stretching endlessly around her like an ocean of grass beneath the unforgiving summer sun of 1878. The charred timber crumbled between her trembling fingers, ash staining the worn fabric of her already soot-covered dress as she desperately searched through the debris for anything that might have survived the devastating fire. A locket, a photograph, any small reminder of the husband she had buried just 3 months prior. "Madam," the deep voice startled her, causing her to whirl around, clutching a half-burned wooden picture frame to her chest like armor. A tall figure stood silhouetted against the late afternoon sun, the brim of his Stetson pulled low. He stepped forward carefully as though approaching a wounded animal. "You shouldn't be out here alone." Gwendolyn hastily wiped at her face, embarrassed to be caught in such a vulnerable state. "This is my home," she replied, her voice hoarse from hours of crying. "What's left of it, anyway?" The man, a stranger, surveyed the devastation with keen blue eyes that seemed to take in every detail at once. His weathered face suggested a life spent outdoors, and the pistol at his hip told her he knew how to handle trouble. "Name's Samuel Frost, madam. Was riding through when I saw the smoke. Thought I might find someone needing help." "You're too late," Gwendolyn said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "It's all gone." Samuel removed his hat, revealing thick brown hair streaked with hints of gold from the sun. "The fire's gone, but you're still here. That counts for something." Something in his steady gaze made her straighten her shoulders. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at her with anything other than pity since William had passed. "I'm Gwendolyn Fairchild. My husband, he died this past spring. Influenza." The words felt mechanical now, having repeated them to neighbors and townspeople for months. "I've been managing the homestead alone." Samuel nodded solemnly. "Mrs. Fairchild, you can't stay here tonight, not with wolves and who knows what else prowling about." He glanced at the darkening sky. "My camp's not far, it's not much, but there's food and shelter." Pride made her want to refuse, but practicality won out. "I suppose I don't have much choice, do I?" "There's always a choice, madam," he replied, extending a calloused hand to help her up. "Just sometimes all the options are equally unpleasant." That unexpected bit of philosophy from a trail-worn cowboy surprised a small laugh out of her, the first she'd managed since finding her home ablaze earlier that day. "You need to gather anything?" he asked, glancing around the ruins. Gwendolyn looked down at the scorched frame in her hands. The glass cracked, and the photograph inside mostly burned away, only the faintest outline of William's profile still visible. "There's nothing left to gather." Samuel led her to his horse, a sturdy palomino that stood patiently nearby. "This is Dusty," he said, stroking the animal's neck. "He's strong enough to carry us both to camp." With practiced ease, he helped her mount before swinging up behind her. Gwendolyn tensed at the proximity. It had been months since she'd been this close to a man, but the innocent necessity of the arrangement soon put her at ease. Samuel kept a respectful distance as much as their shared saddle allowed, his arms reaching around her only to hold the reins. "How long have you been traveling through these parts, Mr. Frost?" she asked, trying to distract herself from the gentle sway of the horse beneath them and the warmth of the man at her back. "Samuel, please. And I've been on the move for near 2 years now. Left Texas when the cattle drives started drying up. Been doing odd jobs since ranch hand, horse trainer, even tried my hand at mining for a spell." "And what brings you to Montana?" There was a pause before he answered, and something in that silence made her wonder what he wasn't saying. "Heard there was work up north. Good land, too. Thought I might finally put down some roots." They crested a small ridge, and Samuel's camp came into view, a small tent pitched near a cluster of pines, a tidy fire pit with flames already dancing, and a coffee pot suspended above it. It wasn't much, but after the chaos of the day, it looked like heaven to Gwendolyn. "It's not fancy," he said, almost apologetically as he helped her dismount. "It's standing," she replied softly. "That's more than I can say for my home." Samuel busied himself with settling Dusty while Gwendolyn sank down on a fallen log near the fire, the events of the day finally catching up with her. Her hands shook as she extended them toward the flames, seeking warmth despite the mild summer evening. "Here," Samuel said, draping a blanket around her shoulders before turning to the coffee pot. "I'll have some coffee ready shortly, and there's a bit of stew left from this morning I can heat up." "Thank you. You're very kind to help a stranger," he shrugged as he worked, his movements efficient. "My pa always said a man who turns his back on someone in need isn't much of a man at all." Sounds like a wise man. He taught me everything I know about horses, roping, and treating people right. Samuel handed her a tin cup of steaming coffee. "It's strong." "Cowboy coffee might put hair on your chest." His eyes widened as he realized what he'd said. "I mean," Gwendolyn found herself laughing again, surprising them both. "I understand your meaning, Mr. Frost, and I've drunk my share of strong coffee." Relief flooded his face as he turned back to stirring the stew pot. "So, Mrs. Fairchild, if you don't mind my asking, how did the fire start?" The question sobered her instantly. "I'm not entirely sure. I was in town picking up supplies when I returned." Her voice caught. "Everything was already engulfed. The drought we've been having, everything was so dry." Samuel nodded solemnly. "Could have been anything: lightning, a spark from a passing rider's campfire carried by the wind. Or not," she said quietly, staring into the flames. "William, my husband, had trouble with some men before he died. They wanted our land, said it was prime for the railroad coming through." Samuel's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. "You think someone set the fire deliberately? I don't know, but it's convenient timing. They've been pressuring me to sell since William passed." He handed her a plate of stew, his expression thoughtful. "Got names. Harlon Tucker runs the land company, but he's not one to get his hands dirty. He has men who handle the unpleasant business." She took a bite of the surprisingly flavorful stew. "This is good. Trail cooking. You learn quick or eat poorly." But his mind clearly remained on what she'd told him. "Mrs. Fairchild, do you have somewhere to go? Family nearby?" Gwendolyn shook her head. "My parents are back east. We haven't spoken in years. They didn't approve of me marrying William and moving west. There's no one." Silence fell between them, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the occasional whinny from Dusty. "What will you do now?" Samuel finally asked. She stared into the darkness beyond the fire's glow. "I don't know. The land is still mine. I could sell, I suppose, but that feels like letting them win, or I could try to rebuild, but—" She gestured helplessly. "I'm just one woman." Samuel set his plate down, his expression resolute. "You need a cabin before winter, that much is certain." "Yes, but I know a thing or two about building. Worked as a carpenter for a spell in Denver." Gwendolyn looked at him with disbelief. "Mr. Frost, you can't possibly—" "Samuel," he corrected gently. "And yes, I can. I was looking for work anyway, and I don't much care for bullies who burn down widows' homes. You don't even know me." His gaze was steady, unwavering in the firelight. "I know enough. I know you're facing this disaster with more courage than most men I've ridden with. I know you're determined to hold on to what's yours despite powerful men trying to take it. That tells me plenty about your character, Mrs. Fairchild." "Gwendolyn," she offered, finding herself drawn to his quiet strength and unexpected kindness. "Gwendolyn," he repeated, and something in the way her name sounded in his deep voice made her chest tighten. "Get some rest. You can take the tent. I'll sleep out here." "I couldn't possibly. You can and you will," he said firmly, but with a gentle smile. "Tomorrow we'll ride into town, get supplies, and see about rebuilding your home." As she settled into his tent that night, surrounded by the unfamiliar scent of leather, pine, and something distinctly masculine, Gwendolyn found herself wondering at the strange turn her life had taken. Hours ago, she had been kneeling in the ashes of her life, and now a stranger, a kind, strong stranger, was offering to help her rebuild it. For the first time since William's death, a flicker of hope warmed her heart. Morning arrived with golden light filtering through the canvas tent. Gwendolyn stretched, momentarily disoriented before the previous day's events came rushing back. Outside, she could hear movement, the soft nickering of a horse, the clank of cookware. She smoothed her hair as best she could and straightened her ash-stained dress before stepping out into the crisp morning air. Samuel stood by the fire, frying pan in hand, his back to her. He'd removed his jacket in the growing warmth of the day, and his shirt stretched across broad shoulders as he worked. "Good morning," she said, causing him to turn. "Morning, hope you slept well." He gestured to the pan. "Breakfast's nearly ready, just some bacon and biscuits, coffee's hot." "Thank you, I slept better than I expected." She poured herself a cup of coffee, noticing that he'd already packed most of the camp. "You're efficient." "Habit," he replied with a small smile. "When you live on the trail, you learn not to waste time." As they ate, Samuel outlined his plan. They would ride into the nearest town, Miller's Creek, for supplies. With luck, they could begin clearing the burned remains of her cabin today and start rebuilding tomorrow. "I have some money," Gwendolyn said. "Not much, but enough for basic supplies. William was always careful with our savings." Samuel nodded appreciatively. "Smart man, and we won't need anything fancy to start, just enough to get you shelter before the weather turns." The ride to her property was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived at the charred remains, Samuel immediately dismounted and began examining the area with a critical eye. "Good water source," he noted, pointing to the creek running nearby. "Plenty of timber in those woods. The foundation stones are still solid." He walked the perimeter of the burned structure. "We can use some of the same footprint, save ourselves some work." Gwendolyn watched him, amazed at how he could look at devastation and see possibilities. "It took William months to build this cabin. He built it alone." "Yes." "I helped where I could, but—" Samuel smiled. "Now there's two of us, and I've got experience. We'll have you under a roof faster than you might think." They continued to Miller's Creek, a small but growing settlement that served as the main trading post for homesteaders in the area. As they rode down the dusty main street, Gwendolyn was acutely aware of the stares they attracted, a soot-covered woman riding double with a strange cowboy. "Mrs. Fairchild." Mrs. Abernathy, the shopkeeper's wife, hurried over as they dismounted in front of the general store. "We heard about the fire. Are you all right?" "I'm managing, thank you," Gwendolyn replied, conscious of Samuel standing protectively close. Mrs. Abernathy's curious eyes darted between them. "And who might this be?" "Samuel Frost, madam," he said, tipping his hat politely. "Just passing through and offering a hand." "How fortunate," Mrs. Abernathy replied, her tone making it clear she found it more suspicious than fortunate. Gwendolyn bristled at the implication. "Mr. Frost has kindly offered to help me rebuild. We're here for supplies." Inside the store, Mr. Abernathy was more practical and less judgmental than his wife. He helped them gather the essentials: nails, tools, canvas for temporary shelter, food staples, and a few necessities to replace what Gwendolyn had lost. As Samuel negotiated prices, the store door opened and 3 men entered. The conversation in the store immediately died. "Well, look who it is," said the tallest of the 3, a thin man with cold eyes. "Mrs. Fairchild, heard about your misfortune." Something in his tone made Samuel straighten, his hand drifting subtly closer to his pistol. "Mr. Tucker," Gwendolyn acknowledged stiffly. "News travels fast." Harlon Tucker smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Small community." "I was just telling my associates that this might be a sign it's time for you to consider my offer. Frontier life is harsh for a woman alone." "She's not alone," Samuel said, his voice level but carrying an unmistakable edge. Tucker's eyes flicked to Samuel, assessing. "And you are?" "Someone who believes a lady has the right to keep what belongs to her without being intimidated." The tension in the store thickened. Tucker's 2 companions shifted their stances, hands hovering near their weapons. "No one's intimidating anyone," Tucker said smoothly. "Just offering a business opportunity. The railroad's coming, and that land will be worth a fortune to the right buyer." "My land is not for sale," Gwendolyn said firmly. "Not to you or anyone else." Tucker's facade of civility slipped momentarily. "You're being foolish." "What are you going to do out there? That cabin's gone. We're rebuilding it," Samuel said. "Starting today, Tucker laughed. "And who exactly are you, mister? Some drifter she picked up. You'll be gone with the next wind that blows through." Samuel stepped forward, his calm demeanor somehow more intimidating than any show of anger. "The name's Samuel Frost, and I'll be around long enough to make sure the lady's home is rebuilt and she's left in peace." The two men stared at each other for a long moment before Tucker finally shrugged. "Suit yourself, but the offer won't stand forever, Mrs. Fairchild." After they left, Mr. Abernathy sighed. "You've made an enemy there, son." Samuel finished gathering their supplies. "Wouldn't be the first time." They loaded their purchases onto Dusty and a mule they'd bought from the livery stable. As they prepared to leave town, Gwendolyn touched Samuel's arm. "You don't have to do this. Those men, they're dangerous." His eyes met hers, and the conviction she saw there stole her breath. "All the more reason not to leave you facing them alone." The following days established a rhythm neither had anticipated but both found oddly comforting. They rose with the sun, worked until dusk, and spent evenings planning the next day's tasks. Samuel proved as skilled with an axe and saw as he had claimed, and Gwendolyn worked alongside him, determined to contribute despite his protests that she needn't push herself so hard. "I'm not made of china," she reminded him on the third day as she helped him clear away the last of the burned timber. "William never treated me as though I would break, and I don't expect you to either." Samuel wiped sweat from his brow, leaving a smudge of dirt across his forehead that Gwendolyn found oddly endearing. "Fair enough. But there's a difference between treating someone like they'll break and being mindful they're working twice as hard as they should have to." "Is that what you think I'm doing?" He gestured to the campsite they'd established near her burned home. "You lost everything days ago. Most people would still be in shock. Instead, you're out here from dawn to dusk, barely taking time to eat." Gwendolyn paused, axe in hand. "Would you prefer I sit and weep?" "No," he said softly. "But I would prefer you allow yourself time to grieve what you've lost." His perception startled her. She'd been so focused on moving forward, on not appearing weak, that she had pushed aside the pain of losing the home she and William had built together, the last physical connection to her husband. "I can't afford to stop," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "If I stop." Samuel stepped closer, not touching her, but near enough that she could feel his presence like a physical comfort. "If you stop, the grief might overwhelm you," she nodded, unable to speak through the sudden tightness in her throat. "I understand," he said, and something in his voice told her he truly did. "But you don't have to carry it all alone anymore." That evening, as they sat by their campfire, the foundation of the new cabin already taking shape nearby, Gwendolyn found herself studying Samuel's profile in the flickering light. "You never said what brought you to these parts. Not really." He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling upward. "Told you looking for work, new beginnings. There's more to it than that." Samuel was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. "I was engaged once," he finally said. "Back in Texas, Emily was her name. We had plans a small ranch, horses, children someday." Gwendolyn waited, sensing there was more to the story. "She died. Fever took her 3 weeks before our wedding." His voice remained steady, but she could hear the old pain beneath the words. "Afterward, staying there, seeing all the places we'd been together, the future we'd planned. It was too much, so I started riding, kept moving for 2 years. Until now," she said softly. He looked up, meeting her eyes across the fire. "Until now." The next morning brought a sense of renewed purpose. Samuel had already laid out the day's work setting the corner posts for the cabin when Gwendolyn emerged from the tent they now shared. He still slept outside, wrapped in his bedroll under the stars. "I've been thinking," she said as she helped him position the first heavy post. "This cabin shouldn't just be a replacement for what was lost." He paused, hands still bracing the timber. "What do you mean?" "I mean..." She hesitated, gathering her thoughts. "William built the original cabin for us, for the life we planned together. But that life, It's gone now. This cabin should be something new, a beginning, not just an ending. Samuel studied her face, and whatever he saw there made him nod with understanding. What would you change? Windows, she said immediately. The old cabin was so dark, I'd like more light. We can do that. What else? A proper porch, wide enough for a chair or two to watch the sunset. Done. Anything else? She smiled, the first truly unguarded smile she'd offered him. I'm sure I'll think of more as we go. His answering grin caused an unexpected flutter in her chest. I don't doubt it for a moment, Mrs. Fairchild. As the days stretched into weeks, the cabin took shape larger and sturdier than the original, with the wide porch Gwendolyn had requested, and windows carefully positioned to catch both morning and evening light. Samuel worked tirelessly, his skin bronzing further under the summer sun, his hands sure and strong as they shaped wood into shelter. Gwendolyn found herself watching him when he wasn't looking, noticing the way his shoulders flexed as he swung the axe, how his hands so large and capable could perform surprisingly delicate work when crafting the window frames. She tried to tell herself it was merely appreciation for his skill, but the warmth that spread through her when their hands accidentally touched told a different story. One evening, as she prepared their meal over the campfire, Samuel came to sit beside her, closer than usual. He seemed nervous, fidgeting with his hat. Something on your mind? She asked, stirring the pot of stew. Cabin's coming along well, he said. Another week, maybe two, and it'll be ready enough for you to move in. Won't be perfect, mind you. Still needs finishing work inside, but it'll be secure against the weather. Gwendolyn's hand stilled. She hadn't allowed herself to think about what would happen when the cabin was complete. Would Samuel simply ride away? The thought created a hollow feeling in her chest that surprised her with its intensity. That's good news, she managed. Gwendolyn, he said, his use of her first name drawing her eyes to his. I've been thinking about what happens after. After. He set his hat aside, running a hand through his hair. After the cabin's done, I know I came here offering to help, not. He took a breath. I don't want you to feel obligated in any way, but I've grown fond of this place, of the work, of, his eyes met hers, of you. The confession hung in the air between them, delicate as a soap bubble and just as iridescent with possibility. Samuel, she began, but was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Both turned to see 3 riders approaching their campsite. Tucker and his men, their expressions grim in the fading light. Samuel stood, positioning himself between Gwendolyn and the approaching threat. Evening, gentlemen. You're a long way from town. Tucker dismounted, eyeing the half-built cabin with obvious displeasure. So it's true, you're actually rebuilding. He turned to Gwendolyn. You're making a mistake, Mrs. Fairchild. That land is meant for progress, not some widow's sentimental attachment. The only mistake, Samuel said calmly, would be if you're here to cause trouble. One of Tucker's men, a burly fellow with a scar across his cheek, spat on the ground. You should have moved on, Cowboy. This ain't your fight. Seems like it is now. Tucker sighed dramatically. I came to make one final offer, Mrs. Fairchild, double my previous price, enough for you to start fresh somewhere civilized. My answer hasn't changed, Gwendolyn said, moving to stand beside Samuel. This land is mine. The cabin is nearly finished. You've wasted your time riding out here. Tucker's facade of civility finally cracked. You think you've won something here? You think this drifter actually cares about you or your worthless piece of land? Samuel's hand dropped to his pistol. I'd watch your tone, or what? The scarred man challenged, his hand hovering near his own weapon. This doesn't need to turn ugly, Samuel said. You've made your offer, the ladies declined, time for you to leave. Tucker stared at them both, calculation in his cold eyes. You know what happened to the first cabin, don't you? Be a shame if history repeated itself. The threat hung in the air like gunpowder smoke. That would be unwise, Samuel said, his voice deadly quiet. Very unwise indeed. Something in his tone or perhaps his eyes made Tucker hesitate. He glanced at the nearly completed cabin, then back at Samuel's steady hand near his pistol. "Come on, boys," Tucker finally said. "These two want to play house in the wilderness, let them, winter's coming. We'll see how romantic it all seems when the snow's piled higher than that poorly built excuse for a cabin." As they rode away, Gwendolyn released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "They'll be back," Samuel nodded, watching until the riders disappeared into the distance. "Probably. But we'll be ready." He turned to her. "I'm sorry our conversation was interrupted." The tension of the confrontation had pushed aside the intimacy of their earlier moment, but now it rushed back, filling the space between them with unspoken possibilities. "You were saying you've grown fond of this place," she reminded him softly. "And of me." His eyes, so steady in the face of Tucker's threats, now revealed vulnerability. "Yes, more than fond if I'm being honest. I know it hasn't been long and your heart might still be tied to William's memory." "I would never presume, Samuel," she interrupted gently, gathering her courage. "I will always carry William in my heart, but hearts have a remarkable capacity to expand." She took a step closer to him. "I've grown fond of you too, more than I thought possible." The hope that bloomed in his eyes made her heart race. "Gwendolyn, I don't want to leave when the cabin's finished. I want to stay if you'll have me." "As what?" she asked, needing to hear him say it. "As whatever you'll allow, a neighbor, a friend, eh?" He swallowed. "A husband someday, if that's something you might want." She reached for his hand, marveling at how right it felt when his fingers curled around hers. "I think I'd like that very much." The kiss that followed was tentative at first, a gentle exploration of something new and precious. When they finally parted, both were smiling, the threat of Tucker momentarily forgotten in the joy of newfound connection. True to Samuel's prediction, the cabin was habitable within 2 weeks. They celebrated with a special dinner, using the new hearth for the first time. As they sat at the small table Samuel had crafted, Gwendolyn looked around at what they had accomplished together. "It's beautiful," she said. "Better than the original in every way." "High praise," Samuel replied, his eyes warm as they rested on her face. "Though I suspect William would approve of the improvements." "He would," she agreed. "He always wanted me to be happy above all else." Samuel reached across the table to take her hand. "That's something we have in common, then." The following days brought a flurry of activity as they prepared for winter. They harvested the small garden that had survived the fire, hunted and preserved meat, chopped and stacked firewood until it formed an impressive wall along the side of the cabin. Through it all, their connection deepened, expressed in shared work, quiet conversations by the fire, and increasingly passionate moments stolen when the day's tasks were done. One crisp fall morning, Gwendolyn woke to find Samuel already gone from his side of the bed they now shared. Wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, she stepped onto the porch to find him standing in the yard, staring at something in the distance. "Samuel, what is it?" He turned, his expression unreadable. "Riders coming, several of them." Fear gripped her. "Tucker, no," he pointed. "Look at how they're riding, not trying to hide their approach, and there's a wagon with them." As the group drew closer, Gwendolyn gasped in recognition. "That's Sheriff Mills leading them, and behind him that's the Andersons and the Clarks and the Wilsons." Soon the yard was filled with neighbors and townspeople, all carrying tools, supplies, and food. Sheriff Mills approached first, hat in hand. "Mrs. Fairchild, Mr. Frost, hope we're not intruding." "Not at all," Samuel said, though his confusion was evident. "What brings you all out here?" Mrs. Anderson, a matronly woman whose husband ran the sawmill, stepped forward. "Word got around about what Tucker and his men tried to do, burning you out, threatening you. Folks weren't happy about it." Mr. Clark nodded. "Sheriff here paid Tucker a visit. Seems his land company's been using some mighty questionable tactics all over the territory. He's pulled up stakes and left town rather suddenly. And we figured," added Mr. Wilson, "that the least we could do was help finish this cabin proper before winter sets in. One day's work with all of us should see it done." Gwendolyn felt tears welling in her eyes. "I don't know what to say, thank you all." "No need for thanks," Sheriff Mills said. "This is what neighbors do. Now, Mr. Frost, where do you want us to start?" By sunset, the cabin was transformed. The interior walls were completed, shelves and cupboards installed, a proper bed frame assembled in the bedroom, and the roof fully shingled. The women had hung curtains at the windows, filled the cupboards with preserves and supplies, and prepared a feast that now covered the extended dining table Samuel had been working on in secret. As everyone gathered to eat, Sheriff Mills stood and raised his glass. To Mrs. Fairchild and Mr. Frost, may your new home bring you years of happiness. Gwendolyn glanced at Samuel, seeing the same thought reflected in his eyes, our home. Later, after their guests had departed with promises to return for a proper housewarming once the snow cleared in spring, Gwendolyn and Samuel stood on their porch, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. "I never expected this," she said, leaning against him as his arm wrapped around her shoulders. "Any of it. The fire, meeting you, rebuilding, finding, love again." Samuel pressed a kiss to her temple. "Life has a way of surprising us. Sometimes for the worse, but sometimes," he turned her in his arms to face him, "sometimes for the better." "Much better," she agreed, rising on tiptoe to kiss him properly. As winter settled over the Montana territory, the cabin Samuel Frost had built with his bare hands stood strong against the wind and snow. Inside, warmth and laughter filled rooms that had once been only ash and memory. Two souls, each having weathered their own storms of loss and grief, found in each other not just comfort, but joy and the promise of many seasons to come. In the spring, they would marry beneath the apple trees that had somehow survived the fire, surrounded by neighbors who had become friends. Children would follow in time, filling the cabin with noise and life. But for now, as snow blanketed the world outside, they had each other, and the home they had built together a testament to resilience, to new beginnings, and to love found in the most unexpected circumstances.